that were very beautiful and very poignant, considering the outcomes. And it's interesting that at the time, Gershom Scholem was the more well-known individual, but I think with the recognition of Benjamin's writing, it's almost way eclipsed. They say he's the most commonly studied PhD subject right now in philosophy.
He's aged better in intellectual life than Gershom Scholem.
So, essentially, his in multiple quotes. I have one of the quotes here because I printed it out for myself. So he talks about the approach to history, or studying history, or think about contemplation of history, is that it's rescue. That an object of history is that through which knowledge is constituted as the object rescue the living. As the object rescue. The living are obliged to prepare a banquet for the past. The historian is the herald who invites the dead to the table. This is in the Arcades Project, and his famous huge enterprise that he never completed, a book of quotes, etc. So, in his thesis on history, he talks again about the idea that our role is again that history is essentially the something to we want to blast open the continuum of history. Again, this idea, like in this spot, that there is an evolution. The point that we get to, the time of messianic transformation, the redemption of world history, is a chain, and we are all links in this chain. And it's the goal of ours to go back and save, so to speak, the people who came before, to redeem them from the bad readings of, as he says here. I like this line. We know that the Jews were prohibited from investigating the future. The Torah and the prayers instruct them in remembrance, however. This stripped the future of its magic, but this does not apply, however, that for the Jews the future turned into homogeneous, empty time. For every second of time was the straight gate through which the Messiah might enter.
And it's a redemption from the victors writing history, all the people who vanquished the Jews, wiped out the Jews, persecuted the Jews.
Oh, let's go universal on that, since I'm already, I want to go there. And say that it's of all suffering, all tears.
But first of all, Jewish tears, Jewish suffering.
Well, yeah.
Our first obligation is to our own people, and then to the world.
Yeah, he says, the past can be seized only as an image which flashes up at the instant when it can be recognized and is never seen again. And then he says, for every image of the past that is not recognized by the present as one of its own concerns threatens to disappear irretrievably. So by our remembering, see, this is why, going back to the very original comment, that it's not about, I don't look at Tisha B'Av as like, how to fast and how to shower and not shower.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the experience of Tisha B'Av is remembering the suffering and the events that happened at that time, and keeping that memory alive as which then leads to this sequence of readings and events in which we transform all of history to the end day.
So we should read a lot of Jewish history on Tisha B'Av.
That's what we do. Oh, here. I like this. So, he says, the danger affects both the content of the tradition and its receivers. The same threat hangs over both, that of becoming a tool of the ruling classes. In every era, the attempt must be made anew to wrest tradition away from a conformism that is about to overpower it. The Messiah comes not only as the Redeemer, he will come as the subduer of Antichrist. So he was borrowing from Christian terminology, but still. Only that historian will have the gift of fanning the spark of hope in the past, who is firmly convinced that even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. And this enemy has not ceased to be victorious. I mean, if we can summarize, we see we see that the Tisha B'Av experience is about the commemoration of a set of calamities that progresses from the mythical, like I don't mean mythical by I believe in the Torah, but I'm just using it the spiritual paradigmatic, whatever you want to call it, of the midrashic narration of the spy episode, where the Jews failed to live up to the responsibility to take control of their own history, essentially. Because going into the land is about, that's, as we talked about before, that's Torah Shabbat Peh. That's making Torah live in the real world. Yeah. And they failed at that point in time. So that is then read by the rabbis as leading to these other destructions, which are then textually treated in a progressively more and more realistic manner. So we go from the first temple destruction, which is very much, you know, magic hands coming out of heaven, spiritual sins, Shabbat, etc., on to where really the, if anything, the second temple is already described as a destruction due to extremism, making the wrong decisions about the fate of the people. And then on to the Beitar, which is even more devastatingly, realistically described. We also see the evolution from that in Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, and what then becomes normative Judaism as Unishalmo Paris Fatenu, that prayer and study, the word, the text, becomes the replacement for the national and the ritual. Yeah. So there's a movement, and it's a universalist moment at that point. At that point, Judaism is no longer bound. See, the Sadducees disappear. The Sadducees, the Tzdukim disappear because they are temple cult bound. They could not evolve past the temple cult. But this moment of universalization of Judaism made it then possible to be a meaningful experience outside of the land in the diaspora.
How does all this fit in now?
And the diaspora itself becomes not just a historical event, but it becomes part now of a cosmic drama. So now we are out in the world, according to the Lurianic reading and evolution of this. God Himself is in exile, right? The unity of God is no longer. God itself is, as it were, split. God itself is not whole, and is in the diaspora. The Shekhinah is with us in the exile. God itself is in exile. We are in exile, and that then leads us to live and act a certain way. And our Judaism is, in a sense, a response. Certainly in the Hasidic Lurianic tradition, is a response to ending that exile, or transforming that exile, or a universalization of it, where now the entire world, not just a small segment of it, is transformed and becomes laden with meaning and mission.
There's a question from the chat room. Can't there be a funner Judaism that does not make one's head hurt?
So and that becomes now that evolves into a set of meanings, as we see here, that in Benjamin and all that becomes like a way of dealing with world crises, with injustice, with the world. I mean, it's interesting. Everybody's talking about Levinas these days, and Levinas himself has a post.
Emmanuel Levinas, that's who we're talking about. French, Jewish philosopher. And there's a question in the chat room: what if you don't want your brain stressed? Well, there's not much room for you in Judaism, because Judaism is a very demanding, intellectually, morally, ritually demanding religion. So if you don't want your brain stressed, then there's not a lot of room for you in the upper echelons of Judaism, or the middle echelons, or the lower echelons. Go ahead. Emmanuel Levinas.
And in fact,